Good day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jakub Kuchařík, and yes, that is a voiced alveolar fricativized thrill in my name. Thanks for asking. I would like to welcome you today to this announcement of the winners of the second ConJam with the theme of space. But firstly, until I get to the conlangs, I would like to thank everyone who participated in this jam, not just with your conlang submissions, we have 15 amazing conlangs, but also with the 116 votes we got on the conlangs. It's more than 3 times more than we got last time, which is amazing. I cannot thank you enough for that. This competition wouldn't be possible at all without you, so thank you very much for everyone who participated, even just by voting. It's so good to see that people are actually interested in this stuff. Also, we have a little change from last time because the top 3 languages won all the categories. So I didn't want to just show 3 languages, so I decided to category. No, I'm not changing that. I decided to do the top 5 languages in this jam or in this announcement rather. So yeah, and we can start with number 5, Oguchan, or rather Oguchan by me. I don't want to talk about this one a lot because I will probably, maybe, perhaps do a video on it some later time when it's more developed or when I have more time or when I have the willingness to do it, but I will show you the basic stuff. Now, what separates Oguchan from other languages? Well, Oguchan has noun classes based on distance from the sea because the Och people who speak Oguchan are a seafaring society, so that's a big part of the world building. They have also a tense dependent on deixis. It changes between if the thing, it's a past tense, so if the thing happened in the past and it also happened here, then it's a different tense from past and happened somewhere else, somewhere further away. Aguchan also has a lot of infixation because it is based on Polynesian languages such as Indonesian and Tagalog. So that's they also have a lot of infixations there, and Oguchan is highly agglutinative. Perhaps maybe polysynthetic, but I don't really wanted to make it polysynthetic, but it's maybe a little more polysynthetic than agglutinative. Yeah, now let's take a look on the Oguchan noun classes. They're based on distance from sea. Each word can change its class depending on where are you standing, because the Och people differentiate between 3 types of environment, that being inland, on sea, and on shore, where most of their settlements are. So you have to specify in which direction and how far, usually, the noun is. If it is, at least if it is tangible. If it is intangible, you sort of do sometimes you do the below class, sometimes do you the near class. It's quite complicated. Also, all the conlangs that there are linked in the description. So if you want to take a look on them, there's the whole PDFs, Google Docs, and such. We also have Oguchan verbs, which take a plethora of affixes. I said that Oguchan is an affixational language, so they can take directionality, which is just case, but applied to the verb, because Oguchan is highly head marking. Also, we have passivity, applicatives, reflexives, polypersonal agreement, and such things. Now that will be all for Oguchan. Like I said, I will maybe, perhaps, probably do a video on it sometime later. And let's get on to number 4. The Nate language by Tonto Higgins, which is a very interesting language. Also, surprisingly, language of seafaring people, spoken on 4 islands in a chain, which are isolated from any other land, so that makes it quite interesting. And also, the culture that speaks this language views a waste of space as a sin, so it is also agglutinative. I don't know why, but we had a lot of agglutinative and polysynthetic languages in this gem, so that's quite interesting. Well, here's the phonology of the Nate language. It's somewhat simple, but has no labial sounds and has a CV structure. Also, there is a tone system of high and low tones. The morphology of the Nate language, of the Nate language rather, is very interesting because each word is split into two roots, if I understand it correctly, and it makes it's split based on the syllables of each word. So, for example, if you had something like the Nate, the name of the language, it would be split into the Na and Te, and some infixes go between these two parts of the noun, and some just go before and after. And it is very interesting to see how these roots can interact with each other. Perhaps I think there is some grammatical thing that requires only one to be reduplicated, like the S1 to be reduplicated, but not the S2, so nanate would be something else. I don't know, I really don't remember what it was, but I know that it was there, and it's very interesting. And S2 may be null in monosyllables, I think. That's pretty clear. The nouns have 22 different cases in three categories. Also, it has case stacking, which is a phenomenon found in languages such as ancient Sumerian. And essentially, you have two cases, or in rather in Nate, in ancient Sumerian, it works a little bit differently. But in Nate, you have two cases like the ablative, meaning from or away from, and the subsessive, which means below something. So, for example, the nateeho would be the below the Nate language. It doesn't make any sense really, but I don't know any other words from nate, and the ablative would be nate uta, and then that would mean something like from the nate language. But if you would combine these two markers, it means from below something. So now, or from under, or from below, or something like that. It is actually very interesting and a very unique concept. I highly suggest doing some personal research on that. Well, nate verbs show evidentiality, tense, and difference between a static and a dynamic verb, which plays into the whole space stuff. For example, you have the static verbs have a motion through time, and the dynamic verbs have a motion through space. It's not based on telecity, how one would imagine, but it's based more on time-space dysphora. So, for example, I taihotiani would be I fight in the static, but if you would turn it into the dynamic, it would be I taihotiahetaina, which would be I attack, which is more dynamic than the static, the process of attacking, which is fighting, but the part of the fight is an attack. It's very interesting to see these derivational strategies used. Now, number 3 on our list, and the winner of best uniqueness and best phonology is this language. It's called Vajasian. I know that the text on your screen doesn't suggest that it is called Vajasian or Vajasian, yeah. But this language is actually spoken by a species of dolphins. And I'm not kidding, and this is the most complicated language in the whole ConJam, I think, at all of the, 2028 languages that were submitted in all of the ConJams. This is the most complicated of them all. It is spoken by Vejas, or Vejas, I don't know how it's supposed to be read, which are dolphin-like creatures. And also the world building of this language is very intricate and well detailed. I would highly suggest to read the document for it. It's very, very, I very, very like it because it's super sci-fi, but not sci-fi. It's unique. I will leave a link in the description for that also. The phonology of this language consists of whistles and clicks and click consonants, which are unpronounceable by the human tongue, by the human apparatus, let's say. But that's why I can't read, for example, the name of this language in the language because, I'm not a dolphin. But yeah, and it's also polysynthetic. Yeah. So here is the phonology. Uh, you have on the left you have the whistles, on the rightmost is the clicks, and on the middle is the whistle clicks combination, which I understand something like fricatives. You do both of them at the same time. Also pitch, the pitch of these sounds is phonemic, and the dolphins have a lot of very precise tonal distinctions between these. So it's very hard to mimic this language because it would just sound something like not the but the you know how dolphins sound like. I don't know why I'm making a dolphin sound. Okay, well, Vajasian grammar. The verbs are marked for subject, object, indirect participants, adverbials, negation, and tense, while the nouns are marked for case, which is either possessive, locative, motive, and genitive, class, which is just a person, number, adjectives, comparisons, definiteness, and conjunctionality, which I don't really understand. It's a lot. There is a lot of things, and it can be very long. The words separately can be very long, and there are also possible things which you can just omit, and sometimes you cannot omit. It's very interesting, but it's very long, and I don't have so much time to show it all here. Link in the description, as always. But I will just point out some features I like. For example, the genitive possessive split, which you can either say the possessive is also marked for person, so you can just say my fish, which is this QUGP word in the middle of the on the leftmost example, and you can just say my fish in one word, or you can specifically say my fish with the emphasis on the my in the second example, because one is with the genitive and one is with the possessive. So in the first example, you would have the fish would be the topic of the word of the sentence, while the in the second the topic would be me because it's my fish or my fish. You know the distinction. We can do it tonally in English, but they do it grammatically in Vajasian. Also, I really like the adverbials. I don't know why. It's just you stick adverbials onto the verb. You can say it's quickly or it's slowly or it's very much, arguingly, finally. Yeah, I don't know why I like it so much, but it's kind of funny. I don't know why. I really don't know why. And the locative and motive are also very cool cases because they specify the motion based on the person and deixis, which is a whole very complicated subject. But essentially, what it does, if you do the locative, you have to say if it is close to something. You would have to do like it's close to you, me, someone else, first, second, third person, or for example the motive if it's going in a direction toward or away from first, second, or third person and such. But I highly suggest reading all the languages in the description if you haven't read them already. It's very interesting. Now, I would also like to make a new award for insanity. Perhaps because this language is kind of cursed, I really don't wanna undermine the objective of this language or something like that, or the creator of this language, which is Entente or Wian. I really don't know how to say that. Yeah, I think this language is very very unique, and yes, I really don't think that the creator of this language is insane in any way possible. Yeah, so here's the new award, take it. By the way, like the 732 messages in the Jassian devlog, which I find really funny. Yeah, okay. Let's move on to the number two. For best grammar and best theme, we have Mihishtuyanil by Azariath. It's a language spoken in Kenyans, in a Kenyanous area, and it is very interesting with its shifting diacritic center. And also, it is a synthetic agglutinative language, and also the attention to detail in this language, and especially in the documentation of this language, is unmatchable. It's There is so many technical stuff and I don't understand at all, but it just makes the language so fleshed out. It makes it like, if I would read it without knowing that it was a ConJam submission, I would believe that this is just a normal language spoken somewhere in North America or something like that. Yeah, it's very, very cool. Well, here's the consonant inventory, which is quite large, at least compared to the other languages, excluding the Jassian. It has, for example, the adjectives, the dental plosives, and aspirated consonants. And here is the vowel system, which includes nasality and the distinction between rounded and unrounded o and and also the allophones after the pharyngeal approximant are very, very nice touch. Now let's look at the nouns. There are three noun cases: the common, oblique, and the locative. The common is used for the subject and object of the subject and object of a sentence or phrase. The oblique is used for everything else except the locative, which is used for locations. That's pretty obvious. Also, when adding numbers before the nouns, you must add a specific affix depending on their shape, kind of like a noun classifier system. In, for example, Vietnamese or Mandarin Chinese, they use this, but it's not an affix, it's a separate word because they're isolating languages. And also, nouns have to be marked for their diacritic center, both temporally and spatially, which is very mind bending, if I can say so myself. It's very fascinating and very mind bending. I'm gonna think like that. Also, nouns are can be also marked, especially human nouns, can be marked for social deixis, depending on if the person is hostile or in a good relation to you, or if you're ambivalent to them, or if the person is more well known or less well known, or it's this whole social deixis is optional, but it's very cool to see it because it's very unique, but it also kind of fits in the space theme, if it makes sense. It's like a social space, not a physical space, and I find it very creative. Now, moving on to the verbs of this language, there are andatives and veratives. Andatives are, I believe, a movement away from the speaker. Venatives rather are movement toward the speaker or the other way around. I don't really remember which of them is which, but they also distinguish between the movement uphill on the same level and downhill, which makes sense since this language is spoken in a canyonous area filled with canyons. I don't know if canyonous is a word. So the uphill downhill distinction makes a lot of sense and also fits the space theme exceptionally well. Mihish Tunail also has a numeral system based on the body parts, which also acts like a measuring system because you count from the origo, which would be your head, I believe, toward the distance of the body part you talk about. So, for example, from the head to the thumb, from the hand to the elbow, or and such. So this system is quite unique. It's base 18, which is an unusual base to say the least, but it's not the largest I've seen. It's feasible. All in all, very naturalistic and amazing conlang by Azaria. I highly suggest everyone to read this because it's very unique and very naturalistic in some sense. So, hands down, amazing language. But it unfortunately was second to number one, also the winner of Best World Building, Best Lexicon, And best script is Rikatishu by Kasreli. And I don't want to talk about the conlangs anymore, so I've got the man himself to say something about it. Kasreli, what do you have to say about your conlang?
It's me, ready, and yeah, so for this ConJam, I made the conlang Rikatishu, and for this conlang, I wanted to do something different to what I normally do again. So I wanted to have more, I guess, simple phonological structure, and also want to lean more heavily into world building for the lexicon and whatnot. So Rikatishu takes place in a convent called Rikatoya, and it's around this big pit in the ground that the people worship called Amikyanire, and people believe that the pit is the origin of all life and that all people are bound to each other and bound to the pit by these threads that control their movement and whatnot. So, since the theme of this conjam was space, as you'll see later, a lot of the words in this conlang have been influenced by the distance in relation to the pit, direction in relation to it, and etc. The setting of Rikatoya is that it's a settlement set pretty far in the future, and so the pit is really just an imperial palace that has collapsed around 5,000 years prior to the events of Rikatoya. So before, so they'd often go on expeditions down to Amikyanire to try to find try to find different religious and sacred objects, but and before they did that, they'd record writing with using threads with four different colors: brown, red, green, and purple. Also, the script has not been deciphered to date. And eventually, with the help of some artifacts from other regions, they ended up deciphering the script that was used to write the quote-unquote religious text found in Amikyanide, which was katakana. So they modified the katakana system to fit their own writing system, to fit their own language. But but however, there are limitations with katakana because you can't represent consonant codas with katakana, and the language also changed quite a lot. And the spelling didn't change a lot at all, which caused a lot of issues for the scribes. Had to memorize characters and whatnot. And eventually decided that they had to make a new abugida, but as a compromise to keep this quote unquote sacredness of the writing system, they decided to keep the old spelling. They have to keep the old spelling, while scrapping all of the syllabary and character writing systems, which makes the Kirin Kadishu a whole mess to write. So, for example, you might have the word, I guess, you might have the word like Sharangu, but it's written Sihalanu because of how the spelling system has not changed at all since classical Kadishu. So, just a disclaimer, I can't pronounce nasal vowels, so I'll be pronouncing all nasal vowels with an N. So, sorry if you get offended by this. So, yeah, phonotactics wise, it is pretty simple. It's consonant vowel, and the vowel can be nasalized or have a tone on it, and the consonant can either be palatalized or be labialized, and that's about it. There are no diphthongs, no long vowels, nothing like that. And there are four classes in the Katishu. There are humans, intangible and sacred animals, and actions, intangible and insacred and tangible things. Also, there isn't really much, I guess, there isn't much like agreement between the noun classes and the verbs per se, because the verbs don't decline for a person at all. The only thing they decline for is the aspect and the certainty of an action. So verbs can be split into four certainties: positively certain, possible, doubt, and negatively certain. So for example, you might use like the possible when you're talking about something that might happen, etc., etc.
I think you said everything important, so I don't have anything else to say other than to congratulate you on your win in the second conjam.
Thank you very much.
Well then, that about sums it up. I again thank everybody who participated in the conjam for your submissions, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.